What if the most terrifying passage in the Bible isn't about beasts or judgment, but worship? Isaiah, the royal prophet, was granted a glimpse into heaven itself. But what he saw was so overwhelming, so unfiltered, that his first words were not praise, but despair. Burning beings above the throne, voices shaking the temple's foundations, smoke, fire, and a name so holy it shattered language itself. This was no poetic vision. It was a confrontation with raw, unspeakable glory. A scene so sacred that ancient rabbis said it should never be spoken aloud. And yet, it was written. Why? What secret was hidden in Isaiah's unbearable vision? And why is it being unveiled now? In the year that King Uzziah died, when the earthly throne of Judah was empty and the national soul trembled under judgment, Isaiah entered the temple, perhaps seeking solace, perhaps repenting, or simply caught in the mourning of a kingdom left leaderless. The air inside the sanctuary was heavy, not just with incense, but with the weight of divine expectation. Uzziah, the king who once dared to invade the priesthood and was struck with leprosy, had died in shame, and the land bore the tension of a sacred boundary violated. Isaiah, of royal blood himself, stood between dynasty and destiny, unaware that he was about to be torn from the ordinary and thrust into the unbearable. Without warning, the veil that shielded the unseen was pulled back, not in metaphor or imagination, but in an eruption of actual holiness. Isaiah saw. And what he saw was not a vision. It was heaven itself unveiled. High and lifted up, enthroned above all, was the Lord, Adonai, the Sovereign One. Not a mere theophany or symbolic glimpse, but the undiluted reality of the throne of God breaking into created space. The train of his robe, vast and flowing, filled the temple, not just in size, but in glory. The hem alone radiated a majesty that overwhelmed the sanctuary's sacred space, consuming the room with presence, not as an idea, but as a living force. Above the throne hovered beings unlike anything Isaiah or humanity had ever conceived. They were not messengers or guardians. They were not even describable in human categories. They were seraphim, burning ones, flames with form, fire wrapped in wings. Each had 6 wings. 2 covered their faces, for even they could not behold the full radiance of the Holy One. 2 covered their feet, for even their movement had to be veiled in reverence. And with 2, they flew, suspended in worship. They did not declare their names, missions, or purposes. They cried only one thing. One truth echoed without ceasing. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And they did not whisper. Their voices thundered. Their cry tore through the structure of the temple itself, and the very thresholds, the foundations, trembled. Not metaphorically, but literally. Stone shuddered. The earth reeled. Smoke filled the house. Not the controlled smoke of priestly incense, but the enveloping cloud of divine presence. The same that once descended upon Sinai. The same that filled Solomon's temple. The same that always accompanied the coming of the living God. In this moment, Isaiah was not a prophet. He was not a noble. He was not a man with a future. He was simply undone, stripped, laid bare before holiness itself. He cried out, not with eloquence or poetic reverence, but with the raw agony of a soul shattered by truth. Woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell among a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. This was not religious exaggeration. This was a man encountering the terrifying goodness of God, the kind of goodness that exposes everything false, the kind of beauty that demands death to everything impure. Isaiah was not struck down by wrath. He collapsed under the weight of glory. For the first time, he understood that holiness was not moral neatness or ritual purity. It was a consuming fire, an unbearable brightness, a force so pure that even angels covered themselves in its presence. He had not just glimpsed heaven, he had entered its court, and nothing in him was fit to remain. This was not the call of a prophet. This was the disintegration of a man. And in that disintegration, the truth was revealed. God is not like us. He is not an extension of human virtue or a projection of our ideals. He is other. He is infinite. He is terrifyingly real. And he is here. Before we continue, if this content has blessed your life, like, comment, and share. Subscribe to the channel, and if you would like to bless the channel, click the Super Thanks button and leave an offering of any amount or become a member. That way, we can continue investing in research and improvements to bless your life even more. They hovered in silence, but their silence was not empty. It was blazing. The seraphim, the burning ones who encircled the throne in Isaiah's vision, are not like the cherubim who guard or the archangels who deliver. These beings do not speak to man. They do not descend to intervene in the affairs of earth, and they do not possess names recorded in Scripture, for their identity is swallowed by their singular function, to burn in worship. Their very name, seraphim, from the Hebrew seraph, means to blaze, to consume with fire. They are not clothed in flame. They are flame, conscious and holy, a living fire that sings. But even as living fire, they veil themselves. Oh, with two wings they cover their faces, not in shame, but in awe. For even beings created to exist in proximity to the Holy One cannot look directly upon him. Their covering is not weakness, but reverence. With two wings they cover their feet, the symbol of movement and direction, hiding every part of themselves that might suggest self-will or personal path. And with two wings they fly, not flapping in erratic bursts, like earthly birds, but suspended in eternal harmony, hovering without falter, as if caught in the updraft of divine presence itself. They do not touch the throne. They do not rest upon foundations. They float, as if glory itself holds them aloft. And they cry, not once, not twice, but always. The Hebrew repetition, holy, 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 is not for emphasis alone. It is the verbal shape of eternity. They speak the one word that cannot be improved, the one truth that no language can expand. Holy is not just an attribute. It is the essence of God, his separateness, his incomparability, his blazing transcendence. And this cry does not echo. It flows. The seraphim do not chant in rounds or sing in response. They cry to one another, as if each revelation of glory compels another shout, and the chorus feeds upon itself, a living circuit of praise that never began and cannot end. There is no fatigue, no boredom, no fading. They do not grow weary, because worship is not their task, it is their being. They are what praise looks like when it takes on shape and fire. And yet, even they tremble. The very foundations of heaven, the doorposts of the temple, not of earth but of the eternal structure, shake when they speak. That which is most stable quakes at the sound of their adoration, revealing that holiness is not quiet or quaint, but seismic. Their voices are not just songs. They are forces that move the architecture of the unseen realm. And all the while, smoke fills the space. Not smoke from wrath, nor the haze of judgment, but the cloud of glory, the Shekinah, the covering that conceals what cannot be borne. Even in heaven, even among the seraphim, the full radiance of God is veiled. This is the staggering truth. The closest beings to the throne do not look upon him directly. They cannot. They dare not. Not because they are sinful. They are not. But because he is infinitely more. And if the seraphim, creatures of fire and purity, must veil their faces, what does that say of man? If those who have never sinned still tremble in God's presence, what hope is there for the dust-born children of Adam? This is what Isaiah felt. Not guilt alone, but the crushing revelation of the chasm between creature and creator. He, a prophet, a man of consecrated lips, found himself completely unworthy in the presence of beings who themselves covered their faces. If they, the burning ones, burn only to worship and cannot behold the face of the Lord, then Isaiah's trembling was not exaggerated. It was appropriate. He had not just stumbled upon a mystery. He had been caught up in a reality that dwarfed all human comprehension. The seraphim are not characters in a story. They are not mythological. They are not poetic symbols. They are the raw machinery of eternal worship, the embodiment of reverent awe. They are the sound of heaven breathing. And in their ceaseless cry, in their unbroken orbit around holiness, we glimpse the reason heaven is not silent, because silence before God would be a lie. There is nothing casual in their presence, nothing idle in their flight. They represent the eternal reaction of creation to its creator, to burn, to cry, to cover, and to continue. This is why they were seen. Not to impress, but to expose. To reveal the measureless gap between the highest and all else. To teach that purity is not enough, that sinlessness alone is insufficient to behold the face of the I Am. Even the pure must veil themselves. Even fire must not presume to look. And if such is the case for the seraphim, then Isaiah's cry, "Woe is me," is not poetic despair, but existential accuracy. He was not simply a sinner. He was a man, and that alone was enough to unravel him in the presence of the uncreated. The seraphim remind us that the throne of God is not surrounded by comfort, but by awe, not by stillness, but by living flame, and that the measure of holiness is not defined by the absence of sin, but by the overwhelming presence of God. They do not leave their post. They do not seek another assignment. They do not tire of the song, because they are not merely in worship. They are worship. And they show us, by their wings and their voices, that to approach the throne is to be changed by it, or destroyed. There is no middle. And so they cry, "Holy, holy, holy," still, now, forever. Then something happened that Isaiah never asked for and could never have imagined. Something that revealed the deepest law of the heavenly realm. A law more frightening and more merciful than judgment itself. One of the seraphim broke formation. One of the burning ones, whose existence was perpetual worship, whose nature was fire, moved toward the altar. This alone was staggering, because nothing in Isaiah's vision moved without divine permission. The altar itself was not an earthly object mirrored in heaven, but the heavenly reality of which every earthly altar was only a shadow. It was the place where holiness and sacrifice met, where fire did not originate from wrath, but from God himself. From this altar, the seraph took a live coal, not dead ash, not fading ember, but living fire, glowing with the intensity of divine presence. This was not punishment. This was preparation. The seraph did not hesitate. It did not consult Isaiah. It did not ask consent. Heaven does not negotiate purification. The burning one flew directly toward the trembling prophet and touched the coal to Isaiah's lips. The lips, not his hands, not his forehead, not his heart. The very place Isaiah had confessed as unclean. The instrument of his calling, the source of his words, the gateway through which prophecy would flow. Fire met flesh, and Isaiah did not scream. He did not die. He did not disintegrate into dust as every instinct would suggest he should. Instead, the voice of the seraph declared words that echoed like thunder and mercy combined. "Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." This was not metaphor. This was not symbolic theater. This was an act of divine surgery. The fire that could have consumed him instead cleansed him. The same holiness that moments before had undone him now transformed him. This reveals a truth that overturns every human assumption about God. Holiness does not destroy what it purifies. It destroys what resists. Isaiah's sin was not ignored. It was not excused. It was burned away. Heaven did not lower its standard to accommodate Isaiah. Isaiah was raised to meet heaven's standard through fire. This is the pattern that repeats throughout Scripture. From the burning bush that was not consumed, to the pillar of fire that guided Israel, to the refining fire spoken of by the prophets, to the tongues of flame at Pentecost. Divine fire is never neutral. It either judges or sanctifies. The difference is surrender. Isaiah had already confessed his unworthiness. He had already agreed with heaven's verdict, and because of that, the fire became mercy. The coal came from the altar, meaning atonement precedes commission. No one speaks for God without first being burned by God. No one carries the word who has not first been touched by fire. Isaiah's prophetic authority did not come from lineage, intellect, or moral effort. It came from contact with the altar. This moment marked Isaiah's initiation into a heavenly order. He was no longer merely a man who saw a vision. He was now a man altered by it. His lips, once unclean, became consecrated. His voice, once human, became a vessel. This is why his book would thunder across centuries, why his words would pierce kings, comfort exiles, and unveil the suffering Messiah with terrifying precision. Because prophecy is not information. It is transmission, and transmission requires purification. Heaven does not entrust its words to untouched mouths. The coal was not gentle. Fire never is. But it was precise. The seraph did not burn Isaiah entirely. It touched exactly where cleansing was required. God's holiness is not reckless. It is exact. And in that exactness, mercy is revealed. The altar fire does not destroy identity. It refines it. Isaiah did not become less human. He became fully aligned with his purpose. Only after the burning does the voice of the Lord speak again, not before. Revelation follows purification, not the other way around. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? The question does not come to the unclean. It comes to the consecrated. Isaiah's response, "Here am I. Send me," was not brave enthusiasm. It was the natural response of a man whose resistance had been burned away. He was no longer arguing with holiness. He was aligned with it. The vision, therefore, was never about spectacle. It was about transformation. Heaven did not open to impress Isaiah. It opened to remake him. This is why this moment was feared by ancient readers, because it reveals that encountering God is not safe. It is not passive. It costs something. Fire leaves marks. Isaiah entered the temple as a man seeking God. He left as a man claimed by God, and the price was burning. This is the law of the altar. Nothing comes near without being altered. Nothing leaves untouched. The coal proves that holiness is not distant but invasive. It comes close. It touches. It burns where it must. And when it does not merely forgive. It transforms. Isaiah's story teaches that the greatest danger is not God's fire, but approaching him without surrender. Because fire will come either way. The question is whether it will consume or cleanse. Then, and only then, after the fire had kissed his lips, after the seraphim had withdrawn, after the smoke of purification still lingered in the unseen air. Isaiah heard the voice. Not the cry of angels, not the trembling of thresholds, but the voice of the one seated upon the throne, the voice that spoke galaxies into motion, the voice that thundered at Sinai and whispered to Elijah. It was not directed at Isaiah alone, for it spoke from within a council of divinity. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? A question formed not from ignorance, but from invitation. A call uttered by the eternal God before a man whose soul had just been reshaped by glory. And though it came as a question, it pressed upon Isaiah like a divine weight, a gravitational pull that no longer allowed hesitation. The man who only moments earlier had declared himself ruined now speaks without pause. Here am I. Send me. The words did not come from confidence, but from cleansing. Not from pride, but from surrender. Isaiah was not volunteering. He was responding. The fire had made him fit. The throne had chosen him, and heaven had asked. But then came the revelation Isaiah did not expect. The mission not of comfort or clarity, but of collision. The Lord said, "Go and say to this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull, and their ears heavy, and blind their eyes." This was not a message of revival. It was a decree of judgment. Isaiah was not sent to awaken. He was sent to witness the hardening. The very act of prophecy would deepen their blindness. The words he spoke, true and blazing with divine origin, would not pierce hearts. They would seal them. He would become a mirror that exposed rebellion, a voice that echoed divine justice into ears too proud to hear. His ministry would not be one of crowds rejoicing, but of leaders raging, of people recoiling, of nations recoiling beneath the weight of unwelcomed truth. And when Isaiah, in stunned agony, asked how long this would last, the Lord's answer was even heavier. Until cities lie waste without inhabitant, and houses without people, and the land is a desolate waste. The message would not be temporary. It would carry until judgment ran its course, until desolation confirmed the righteousness of the warning. Isaiah was commissioned not for success, but for obedience, not for reception, but for resistance. This was the sacred tragedy of the prophet. He would speak on behalf of a God whom the people no longer feared, and he would do so knowing they would reject every word. His call was not to persuade, but to proclaim. His mission was not to convince, but to bear witness. Heaven had not asked for a strategist or a reformer. It had summoned a herald. And heralds do not tailor the message, they deliver it. Whether heard or hated, their task is the same. This is the agony of true prophecy. It burns not only the lips, but the life. The prophet must often walk alone, speaking words that bring no applause, only accusation. He is called not because he is strong, but because he has been broken and rebuilt in the fire. And Isaiah would walk this path for decades, through the reigns of kings, through national collapse, through the exile he foretold. He would see no national repentance, no sweeping revival, no moment of vindication. But he would speak, again and again, because the throne had spoken to him, and fire had touched his lips, and the burden of the word was too heavy to remain silent. This is the pattern woven through all who are truly sent. Moses stood before a burning bush and was sent to a Pharaoh who would harden his heart. Jeremiah was appointed from the womb to preach to a nation that would persecute him. Ezekiel was told to speak whether they listened or not, for they were a rebellious house. And Jesus, the Word made flesh, would declare that his parables themselves were fulfillments of Isaiah's strange commission, that seeing they would not perceive, and hearing they would not understand. Prophecy, then, is not performance. It is confrontation. It is the collision of divine holiness with human resistance. And those who bear its weight must often do so without reward, without results, without relief. Isaiah's commission reveals that heaven measures obedience differently than earth. Success is not defined by applause, but by faithfulness. Impact is not always visible. Vindication may come only in eternity, but still the word must go forth. Because truth is never wasted, even when it is rejected. Light is never diminished, even when it's shut out. And the prophet, though alone in the eyes of men, walks ever in the fire-lit shadow of the throne. This is why Isaiah's words still thunder today, not because they were welcomed, but because they were true. Not because they were embraced, but because they were eternal. The commission that crushed him also crowned him. The mission that isolated him also immortalized him. And the voice that once shook the temple would echo through him for the rest of his days. For once a man has been burned by God, he can never speak the same again. There are scriptures that comfort, and there are scriptures that confront. But then there are scriptures that burn. Isaiah chapter 6 belongs to this third category. So blinding in its radiance, so raw in its unveiling, that for centuries, even those most steeped in sacred tradition hesitated before it. Among the rabbis of old, the teachers of Israel who handled the words of God with precision and reverence, there arose debate, not over its meaning alone, but over whether it should be read aloud at all. The question was not about doctrine, but about danger. Could words that recorded a prophet's vision of the Most High enthroned, surrounded by living fire, truly be spoken by mortal lips without consequence? Some feared that to recite Isaiah's vision was to trespass upon holy ground with unwashed feet. Others warned that to draw attention to the throne too boldly was to invite its judgment. And still others, in hushed voices, suggested that this passage contained mysteries that were never meant for the ears of the unprepared. They did not say this out of superstition or ignorance. These were men who had memorized the Torah, who lived immersed in the Psalms and the prophets, who debated the placement of a single letter with fervent care. Yet Isaiah's vision stood apart. It was not a teaching. It was a rupture, a crack between realms, a place where the veil thinned and words reached too close to the burning center of reality. For in these verses, God is not merely mentioned, he is seen. Not as a concept, not as a vision wrapped in symbols, but as one seated, reigning, with the temple filled by the hem of his robe and the air vibrating with the unceasing cry of the seraphim. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. These were not poetic repetitions. They were sonic eruptions from the heart of heaven, echoing in Isaiah's ears, reshaping his soul, and now transcribed onto parchment with trembling hand. To read this aloud, they feared, was not simply to study, it was to summon. The words were not description. They were participation. They did not just inform, they invited. And not all invitations are safe. The ancient sages recalled stories of men who spoke too freely of the throne and were struck down, or who entered too boldly into mystical speculation and were consumed by their own pride. They recounted the tale of the four who entered the Pardes, the mystical orchard of divine secrets, and how only one emerged whole. They reminded their disciples that even Moses, friend of God, was hidden in the cleft of a rock lest the sight of divine glory kill him. How then could Isaiah's unfiltered vision be spoken of without risk? Some said it should only be read on Yom Kippur, when the community stood repentant and the high priest himself had entered the Holy of Holies, a day when the boundary between heaven and earth was already thinned by sacrifice and humility. Others argued it should never be read aloud at all, but only studied in private by those who had fasted and purified themselves. And even then, only with whispered breath. But whether prohibited or permitted, all agreed. These were not ordinary words. They were too high, too near the edge, too full of glory to be handled without fear. And yet, they remained in the scroll, preserved, transmitted, not hidden away, but held in the center of the prophetic canon. For though they were dangerous, they were also necessary. Isaiah's vision was not given for concealment. It was given for witness. And so the tension remained, to speak what should not be spoken, to describe what cannot be described, to recite words that rend the soul as they reveal the heavens. It is this tension that still clings to Isaiah 6. Even today, when the passage is read in churches or synagogues, there is often a hush that falls. Not out of habit, but out of something older, deeper, more instinctive. A sense that these are not words we master, but words that master us. They speak from another realm. They pull back the curtain. They unmake pride and invite purification. And they do so not with suggestion, but with fire. This is why the early Christians, inheritors of Isaiah's words, saw in this passage not just the call of a prophet, but the shape of the gospel. Here is the pattern: the glory of God revealed, the sin of man exposed, the altar of atonement activated, and the call to mission issued. This is what happens every time a soul truly meets God, not through religious performance, but through divine encounter. And this is why the passage still shakes those who read it, not because it is ancient, but because it is eternal. It is not a record of what once was. It is a glimpse of what always is. The throne has not moved. The seraphim have not ceased. The temple is still filled. The voice still asks, "Whom shall I send?" And the fire still burns. So we approach this text not as scholars, but as seekers, not as analysts, but as worshipers. For to read Isaiah 6 is not merely to remember a vision, it is to stand in it. Before we continue, if this content has blessed your life, like, comment, and share. Subscribe to the channel, and if you would like to bless the channel, click the Super Thanks button and leave an offering of any amount or become a member. That way, we can continue investing in research and improvements to bless your life even more. Centuries passed, kingdoms rose and fell, prophets came and wept and vanished into the scroll of time, and still the throne remained, unshaken, unseen, and to many, forgotten. But heaven had not forgotten. The same throne Isaiah saw, the same trembling holiness that scorched his soul and silenced generations, was not content to remain enthroned in mystery. For the fire Isaiah saw, the glory that filled the temple, the voice that thundered, "Whom shall I send?" All of it was preparing for something far more audacious. The word did not remain written. It became flesh. And when it did, the throne Isaiah feared stepped down into the dust. The Gospel of John pulls back the veil Isaiah once glimpsed and dares to say something astonishing. Isaiah saw his glory and spoke of him. John 12:41. Whose glory? Christ's. Not merely the glory of an abstract God, not a veiled theophany, but Jesus himself, the one who would walk Galilean roads, touch lepers, calm seas, and be rejected by the very people Isaiah was sent to warn. The throne did not merely send a prophet. The throne put on sandals. It stepped into our pain. It moved into our cities. It wept over our unbelief. And the terrifying holiness Isaiah feared now took the form of a man who ate with sinners and knelt to wash the feet of the unworthy. Yet even in this descent, the fire did not fade. It only changed form. Jesus quoted Isaiah's commission directly when explaining the people's resistance to his message. He has blinded their eyes and hardened their heart. John 12:40. The same words given to Isaiah about a people who would hear but never understand. Jesus claimed as the backdrop of his own rejection. He was not surprised by it. He was fulfilling it. The prophet had seen his glory, and now that glory walked among men, veiled in flesh, yet burning with the same divine fire. And then, in the hour no one expected, the veil tore again. Not in a vision, but in a temple. At the death of Christ, as his blood ran down the wood of the cross, the thick veil separating the Holy of Holies from the people was torn from top to bottom. Not by human hands, but by divine decree. The veil that Isaiah could not pass, the curtain that had kept men from the throne, was ripped apart by the death of the one who had come from beyond it. Holiness had not been compromised. It had been satisfied. Justice had not been dismissed. It had been fulfilled. The coal that once burned Isaiah's lips now poured out as blood to cleanse the world. The altar fire had descended, and it had chosen flesh over distance, incarnation over silence. But heaven was not finished. 40 days after the resurrection, after the glory of the throne had walked among men, taught them, fed them, and forgiven them, the fire came again. This time, not from the lips of a seraph, but from the mouth of God himself. On the day of Pentecost, in an upper room filled with men and women who had waited in trembling expectation, fire fell again. But it did not destroy. It did not hover in terror above a throne. It divided itself, resting on each one present. Tongues of fire, like the coal that touched Isaiah's lips, now touched every believer. And they did not cry, "Woe is me." They proclaimed the wonders of God in every language under heaven. What Isaiah had experienced in singular terror, the early church received in multiplied power. The holiness that once shattered a prophet now indwelled a people. The vision that was once too holy to speak now lived in their very bones. They became the new Isaiahs, not because they had seen heaven in a vision, but because heaven had entered them. The spirit that surrounded the throne in Isaiah 6 had now come to dwell within the hearts of men. The temple was no longer a building, it was a body. The fire no longer burned above, it burned within. And the mission had not changed. The same, "Whom shall I send?" still echoed. And now, filled with the Spirit, the people of God replied in every tongue, "Send us." This was not just theology, it was transformation. The gap between heaven and earth, once insurmountable, had been bridged. The God Isaiah could not look upon now walked with his people. The fire that once made angels cover their faces now burned with love and power in fishermen and tax collectors and former enemies. Heaven had not grown weaker, it had grown nearer. The vision that once silenced the rabbis now thundered from pulpits, from prison cells, from the mouths of martyrs. It was no longer too holy to speak. It had become the very message itself. Christ crucified, Christ risen, Christ glorified. The throne had moved, not from its place in heaven, but into the center of human history. And now the call was not just to prophets or priests, but to all. Be holy, for I am holy. The fire had been democratized, not diluted, but distributed. The Spirit of the Lord was now upon all flesh. And every time the gospel is preached, every time a heart is pierced, every time someone says, "Here am I, send me," the echo of Isaiah's vision resounds again. The throne Isaiah saw is not gone. It is still high and lifted up. The seraphim have not ceased their cry. The temple still trembles. But now, The glory that once filled the sanctuary fills the world. And the question that thundered in the prophet's ears still seeks a voice. Heaven has descended. Who will rise to speak its truth? The vision did not end with Isaiah, nor was it confined to the trembling walls of Solomon's temple. What he saw, the throne, the fire, the seraphim, the shaking earth, the smoke-filled air, is not sealed in the amber of ancient history, but blazing in the present, as alive today as it was in the year King Uzziah died. Revelation chapters 4 and 5 tear open the heavens once more, and what do they reveal? The same throne, still set in place. The same creatures, still crying, "Holy, holy, holy." The same sea of glass, the same flashes of lightning, the same peals of thunder that shook Isaiah's bones. The fire has not dimmed. The holiness has not evolved into something gentler or more palatable. The throne has not been modernized. It still blazes in terrifying glory, still demands reverence, still exposes the depths of every human soul that dares approach. John, like Isaiah, falls down as though dead. Ezekiel, like Isaiah, collapses under the weight of what he sees. There is no casual entrance into this realm. There is no flippant gaze at the one who sits on the sapphire throne, surrounded by emerald light and creatures full of eyes. The vision was never meant to entertain. It was never meant to decorate stained glass or become fodder for commentaries. It was meant to pierce, to break, to awaken. And though centuries stand between us and the prophets who beheld it, the throne still burns, and it is watching. Through Christ, the veil has been torn. The coal has touched more than one set of lips, and the invitation has gone out not to the few, but to the many. And yet, the call remains the same, and so do the terms. Purification, reverence, surrender. No one steps into this fire and remains as they were. The cross is not the absence of holiness. It is its deepest expression. The Jesus who wept is the same Jesus Isaiah saw exalted, the same Jesus John fell before, the same Jesus who now reigns in glory. He is not less holy because he is more accessible. Grace is not the softening of God's nature. It is the means by which we can stand in it without being destroyed. And yet, even with grace extended, the throne remains a place of awe. The fire has not lost its heat. The cry of the seraphim has not lost its volume. And the invitation has not lost its urgency. The church today often whispers where the prophets shouted. We trade trembling for trending, power for performance, and we forget that the same God who invited Isaiah still speaks. He is not interested in self-made kings. He is still looking for those who will fall to their knees and confess, I am a man of unclean lips. He is still looking for those willing to be purified by fire, willing to say yes before knowing the cost. Because make no mistake, the cost is high. The same fire that purifies also isolates. The same calling that glorifies also wounds. But to say, here am I, send me, is to join a lineage of those who stood before the throne, not as spectators, but as servants. It is to accept that your life is not your own, that your mouth is now an instrument, that your message may never be received, but must still be declared. The throne still burns, and the earth still waits for voices shaped by fire, not by ambition, not by talent, not by platforms, but by purification. The vision matters now because God has not changed. He is not more approachable because he has lowered himself. He is more dangerous because he has drawn near. Emmanuel, God with us, is not a comforting slogan. It is a declaration of proximity to fire. The fear of the Lord is not an Old Testament relic. It is the beginning of wisdom. And Isaiah's vision was not given to scare us. It was given to prepare us. to remind us that the same throne Isaiah saw is watching now, that the question has never stopped echoing, "Whom shall I send and who will go for us?" And that even now, even in this generation of noise and confusion, of compromise and convenience, heaven is still waiting for someone to respond, not with qualifications or conditions, but with trembling lips that have been touched by burning coal, and a heart that has already said yes. The invitation is open. The throne is not vacant. The fire still falls. The question remains. Who will say now, in this very moment, "Here am I. Send me"?